recently went through one of the worst patches in my dating history. Well, since I stopped being a virgin anyway. Shout out to 21-year-old virgin me. But a few months ago, I just couldn't seem to get anything going. Everything I did seemed to go wrong. Like, I wasn't getting text backs. I wasn't really doing that well in when I was approaching. And I was just like, what has happened? I had to really think about it, of what had happened between the guy that was going on dates, having relationships and meeting these amazing girls, to this guy that couldn't even get a text back. And it took me a minute, but I did manage to figure it out. Around the same time, what had been happening for me was I joined Twitter, and I was starting to expand my profile on Twitter, and to do that, I needed to follow the biggest accounts, the biggest dating accounts on there. So what I did was I followed the accounts, I started interacting with their posts, I started reading what they were saying. And this has led me to the belief that 99% of dating advice is absolute trash. Because clearly what happened for me was my monkey brain was like, oh, these guys, they've got like 1 million followers. They must know what they're talking about. And I think it somehow bled in, because when I reflected back, yeah, their information had started to reflect in how I operated and how I was around girls. And I've broken down the 3 main reasons why I think most of the mainstream dating advice is just utter trash. Number 1, it is what I call performative. In most dating advice, it's very much do this action, say this thing. If she does this, you should be looking to try and do this. Try and do this to get that result. All of this is just performative. It gets away from what is the most vital element of building a connection with somebody, and that is to be real. And all of these dating channels, all they ever talk about is how you should be. You should hold frame. If she does this, maybe you need to sit on this side of the table. But I way prefer the Mark Manson method. That one of the best things he ever spoke about was, you can do whatever you like, you can do any action, you can say whatever you like, and it can be attractive. It all comes down to the intent behind it. Because if you peel back the layers, the guy that's been reading these dating channels and starts to take on board what they're saying, maybe he uses one of the lines that they suggest. What's the intent behind that? I don't feel good enough as I am. I don't think that you would like me for who I truly am. So I'm going to take other people's words to try and manipulate you into liking me. And that's what they encourage. And I think they do this just because it's an easier pitch. It's a lot easier to tell guys that the reason you're not doing well with girls is just because I'm gatekeeping this amazing information that if you knew, then suddenly you'd be hyper attractive and you can just regurgitate what I've said you should say. When it isn't the case whatsoever. The way that you get better with girls is learning to express who you really are better, because that's the person that they can connect behind. Why would an inauthentic person build a connection? And this is what had happened to me. And I noticed that I'd moved away from believing that who I was in the interaction was already good enough for whatever girl that I spoke to. I was already believing in myself, so I would talk about the kooky things that I'm interested in, and I'd do things that were authentic to me. But through watching these profiles and reading their tweets and interacting with them, I noticed that I was starting to perform behaviours that they said worked. And the issue is, relationships, they're just so contextual that if you take a line that they suggest you use, well, what if it's not relevant to the current scenario? What if it's built for meeting a girl in a bar and you're deciding to use it at the gym? They're so fundamentally broken, this idea that you can just give some general advice and it'll work, because dating is specific, it's nuanced. The only real dating advice is the ones that tell you to work on your ability to communicate who you are in that true fashion. And that's what actually works. So my first fundamental principle is most dating advice teaches you to be performative, which always communicates that who I am is not good enough to get you on its own. So I'm going to perform as a dancing monkey to try and get your attention, which will always fail because a girl will know this and realise he thinks he needs to perform. If he doesn't believe he's good enough to get me on his own, I'm not going to believe it. So that's number one. Number two, and that is, it creates a fucking adversarial relationship between men and women. If you read any of these profiles, it's not like it's this mutual thing where you meet and you connect with this person and you have the opportunity to grow a relationship. All dating advice seems to see it as this zero-sum game where I am going to win you over, and it's because of my mastery that I've convinced you and now you're mine, which is just such a dumb approach that almost the girl has to lose in order for you to win, which just isn't the case at all with a healthy relationship, in that going in with this idea that we could both have something awesome here. I'm bringing my real self to this. If you want to bring your real self, we could have an awesome time together. I'm already whole without you, but we could do something great, which is just in stark contrast to this, like, women-hating mantra that seems to go around online, and just this bitterness that comes from most dating profiles. So that's the second reason that I think it reinstilled some just weird belief that the girl was there to be conquered as opposed to be partnered with, which is super strange. And then thirdly, and this one's a real fucker, they deliberately overcomplicate it. And I can tell you right now, there are only two reasons someone would overcomplicate a topic or something that they're trying to advise you on. The first reason is because they don't understand it themselves. If you ever speak to an expert at something, they're amazing. They can break it down to you as if you're like 5 years old. So they speak about it in this complex manner because they just don't understand it themselves. And secondly, if you can build up this perception that the female psyche is just this infinitely complex thing that you need a degree to understand to get that relationship, well, they're in luck because they're the ones selling the degrees, and then they can convince you that you need to buy all their shitty ebooks to be able to unlock a girl's psyche, when in reality the only thing guys should be getting taught is your ability to communicate and express who you really are, to be able to attract the girls that actually like you. So these are my three main reasons, and it took me a minute to realise what was going wrong in my dating life, but it was certainly because, as I say, my monkey brain was just forgetting my own personal experiences and what had got me to the place that I am at now and escaped being that fucking 21-year-old virgin. And it was because I'd learned to be able to display myself in a manner that I was confident with, that was actually me, as opposed to just some performing monkey, which is what they all teach you to do. I guarantee you, if you look for dating advice and it gives you nonsense performance tactics, it'll ruin your opportunities with girls, because even if you manage to get her, you didn't really get her, the role did. And something that I learned recently from Chris Williamson's podcast is, if you play a role, the role can only receive validation. It can't receive love. So it always feels empty, and it just craves the validation more. And do you want to know what destroys a relationship very fucking quickly? That is the pursuit of validation from the girl. So be really careful when you're out there looking for dating advice, and always be careful when falling for the trap of, just because they've got a ton of followers and loads of people listening to them, doesn't mean it's right. Use your instincts, learn to express yourself, and start to have the relationships that you deserve.